First of all, really appreciate everyone joining us today. We know you guys have a lot of time. Our goal is going to be to give you some practical content. We want you to walk away with information that you can use today. The topic is going to be, how do you improve Microsoft Teams call quality? It is a hot button topic. Obviously, with the pandemic and hybrid workforce, Teams exploded. As a guy that spent my whole career doing Exchange, when I was told about a year and a half to 2 years ago from someone very senior at Microsoft that Teams was going to become the centerpiece and surpass email, I kind of scoffed, but the reality is Teams is the centerpiece for communication. So in today's webinar, we're going to cover what are the most common causes of poor call quality, how can you leverage the Microsoft Teams Admin Center, where to go in there if you've used it and you want some tips, we're going to cover that. What are some of the pitfalls of setting up the CQD and just working with the CQD? There's a lot of great information in there, but it is a beast. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how we can go beyond the native tools and ultimately improve people's ability to support your user community around Teams. I am the CEO and founder of eNow Software. As I mentioned, I spent 25 years deploying Exchange. I started my own company, and our mission is to simplify and make it easier for IT pros to do their job. And with 365, things are super complicated, less visibility, and specifically with Teams. I am joined by two of my friends, and I'm super stoked because these are the real experts. I'm kind of just moderating and being a chair. Tom, do you want to tell a little bit about yourself? Obviously, we have a great bio here about you being an MVP, but I think the world knows who you are. But share a little bit about just if you could start first with your background, and then we can segue into what are you doing now, because I know you're doing some really cool stuff, and we want to share that with our audience so they can benefit.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jay. Yeah, so the background is I've been in the UC space for a long time. So I used to work at a Cisco partner way back in the day when Call Manager first launched. That was my world. And then during the OCS times, more and more, believe it or not, even back in those days, people were doing OCS with Cisco. So I kind of saw the writing was on the wall that Microsoft were on something special. I was number 7 into a company called Modality who focused just on Microsoft UC, went through OCS, Link, Skype for Business, all the rebrands, mostly working with enterprise customers. So anywhere between kind of, a few thousand seats to a few 100,000 at one of them, all through Microsoft UC, and then last few years Teams. At the December year just gone, so almost a year to date, I span out and built my own company, Empowering Cloud. So I'm working for a carrier a couple of days a week, pure IP on strategy, great team there. And the rest of my time is all on my Empowering Cloud, which is a new take on kind of training, advisory, and insights for Microsoft Teams industry professionals. So really trying to take, as you said, the cloud is ever changing, trying to take some of that knowledge and make it accessible to a wider community.
Yeah, I view the cloud as a bullet train that we're all on in some shape or form. As a vendor, we have to make sure we're delivering value and solving problems. As IT professionals, we have to be able to figure out how we support our users. From a training perspective, there's a ton of training companies out there, Tom. Obviously, your reputation everyone knows about, but what would you say in terms of your training material? What specific, like who's it directed at? And what is the content? What's the goal of the content? And I'm gonna ask you a third question. How is it different than the plethora of other training out there, beside the fact that you're creating it?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because obviously you've got your plural sites and your CPT nuggets and a dozen other great places to go and see Microsoft training. The real difference is we're trying to be very real world. So we're keeping it short, sharp, concise, no marketing, not a pitch deck, but also we're covering the Microsoft Teams ecosystem. So Teams is one of the only products in the Microsoft stack that needs ecosystem to complete the story. So you need devices, probably compliance recording, contact center, you need operators in play. So a lot of the Microsoft's focus training stops at the edge of the Microsoft product, whereas our stuff will go into the wider ecosystem. And then the other big difference is we're pulling in subject matter experts. So we're not having one person do like all of an MS700 course. I mean, we've got that covered, but we're pulling in specific experts for specific topics. So like a VDI person, a recording person, a contact center person. And also it's very much a two-way street. It's not just training, it's a community. So there's 1,500 people on already, and we're looking for people to kind of challenge us, point out things that are wrong, improve the content. Because like you say, bullet train, it's moving so fast, nobody knows everything, but between all of us as a community, we can kind of be like, well, I've seen this and I've seen this and I've seen this, and you'd be surprised, or maybe not, how often it's someone from the community who's like, oh, this has changed, or this is the edge case, or this is how it works. So it's about bringing people together as much as the content.
Yeah, I think who delivers the content is super key. And I think that's the whole value of this webinar, right? You have spent years in unified communications. I spent years in unified communications, not anywhere near the level of expertise that you and Nicolas provide. But when you're putting together that content, it needs to be dynamic. It needs to keep up. And I know you have a great network of people. So looking forward to hearing more about that, Tom, and seeing some of your trainings. Also joining us today is all the way from South Africa is Nicolas Blank, a really good friend of mine. Nicolas runs a Microsoft Gold Partner, systems integrators, how I would kind of characterize it. Nicolas, tell us more about your company and a little bit also specifically about your experience with Teams and why you're on the call today.
Thanks, Jay. I've followed Exchange into the cloud very much like you did. And 15 years ago, I started a consulting company that specialized in taking folks to the cloud, or in those days, we would still build clouds. Now, we're very much focused on all things Office 365 and productivity. And with that, there's a massive investment in Microsoft Teams. So we work all over the world, and we've had the pleasure of working with some of the largest and most complicated companies that are out there and solving Teams call quality issues. We've also had a large history of working together with software companies such as yourselves and building better products for the ecosystems that we're in, and that includes both Exchange and Teams.
Yeah, and specifically, what are some offerings you guys have? So say I am on this call right now, and I'm tired of just getting these angry calls from executives and people, and it's just, you're supporting technology. I have so much empathy, just from my background of supporting users before I started E now. It is a thankless job, right? And people are always expecting things to be up. I think there's more stress now, thanks to Twitter, and not that Elon has anything to do with stress. I'm just saying there's so much noise, and we're subjected to noise, and our patience level goes down. Our user community's patience level has gone down. And so when technology breaks, they take it out on the people that support the technology, and now there's less visibility. So what would you say in terms of what type of offerings your company has if someone's out there struggling with Teams? Can you give some more specific examples of assessments, projects that you guys do, migrations? You guys cover a lot, and you're being very modest, so I'm trying to pull this out of you, Nicolas, so the world can learn more about what you do.
Yeah, so when we came back to work after the pandemic, we had this aftermath of, well, things work at home, and why is my experience at home not as good as what I have at work? And one of the things that we had to wrestle with is that the network that's built to browse the internet at work is not the same network that you use to consume Microsoft Teams or Microsoft 365. And with that, we've had to build offerings around how do we understand how to pivot my position that I have in my corporate network so that I still stay compliant and I can still do the things that I need to do to stay secure, but I'm able to adopt cloud services. And that speaks directly to Microsoft Teams, OneDrive, obviously Teams Voice. What are we doing around Exchange calendaring? So we've had a lot of work going on around transforming our organizations initially to go into cloud. Then we migrated them from one cloud to another cloud. Obviously, there was a lot of Office 365 tenant consolidations going on. And in that, what do we do with Teams, where we understand that Teams is actually represented by OneDrive and Exchange and SharePoint under the hood. And then there's this voice component. So we've spent a lot of years building out offerings on top of Microsoft Teams Voice. We actually built our own Teams Voice platform in South Africa and offer that to market in terms of our direct routing offering. And having to figure these things out, we've built a lot of expertise on helping customers move to cloud in a way that they get the same performance at home as at work, where at home the performance is amazing and you get to work and it's like, I'd rather work from home.
No, absolutely. Thank you for giving us additional color. Obviously, both Tom and Nicolas's contact information is here, but I would really encourage the audience, if you're looking for training, if you're looking for a second set of eyes to look at some complex problems, these are great guys to connect with. So let's dive in, guys. What, in your guys' opinion, you guys spend a lot of time working with different companies. What causes bad teams call quality from what are you guys seeing out there in the field? What are some of the top reasons?
Yeah, so if you want to jump onto the slide, there's a few top issues there.
Sure.
Nicolas, you jump in first. You've got some recent big experience.
Yeah, and this is Tom. We spoke about this quite at length. I think the first thing that we get, obviously, besides, and I'll let you talk to the endpoint piece, but I've spent a lot of time on networking. And we've spent a lot of time on understanding how does the endpoint connect to the corporate network? How does the corporate network, and that's actually the largest story for me, how does the corporate network connect to the internet, and how does that network then connect to Microsoft, which are three different areas that we want to be able to instrument. And Tom, you're going to be speaking to that later on this call, so I don't want to steal anything there from you, but the thing that I wrestle with the most is this corporate network that doesn't perform as well as the network I have on my phone via 3G or the network that I have at home. And that combined with poor corporate Wi-Fi, folks still using 2.4 as opposed to 5.2, much less bandwidth, and so much less spectrum to go around. We're trying to squeeze this super latency sensitive experience into bad networking.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a top one. And you say, particularly in enterprise, we're seeing a lot of that. So I get to see a lot of big customers reporting, and coming back to the office has been a challenge because we all adopted video during the pandemic. That habit has mostly stayed because people who are now remote expect to see the person in the office. But the enterprise networks were not scaled, particularly, you say, 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, the firewalls, the proxies. And an interesting one is it's not just about raw throughput and the bandwidth, it's about the latency, the jitter. Like, you can have a lot of throughput but still have a bad quality network as far as UC goes, because it's about consistency more than just throughput. The other big category you just alluded to there is obviously devices. So we've got network, we've got devices, and often people are pushing the limits of teams. So it'll be they'll whack open believe it or not, their laptop in Starbucks and start talking on a call with PC mic and speakers. And the problem with that is not just that user, because that user knows they're compromising their experience, and they're sort of accepting of that. But what happens is somebody else will report the issue, and they'll be like, Teams is rubbish, like this was an awful call. And they don't have comprehension that somebody was wide open mic in Starbucks, and that it wasn't network actually in that scenario. Network's solid enough, it's the device. So another one on devices is people stretching the limits on Bluetooth, either over density of Bluetooth or just they've got a Bluetooth headset at home and they're stretching the limits. They're heading to their kitchen for a coffee, and you get breakup of voice quality. Network could be fine there, but the Bluetooth could be the weak link.
I have a question for you guys.
Tom,
different companies that you guys see and you work with, are you seeing a shift to people coming back into the office? Is it hybrid? Is it all over the place? I'll give you my perspective, but I want to hear what you guys are seeing in your areas of the world.
Yeah, so for me, I'm seeing some companies wanting people back and general reluctance. Like, it's not been easy, certainly in Europe. People have got quite comfortable. So I'm in and around London a lot, and most of my customer meetings are online now. And I'm like, I'll come into the office. It's like, no, we're not even in. So the enterprises are trying to suggest people come back in, and it's a day a week, it's 2 days a week, it's teams meeting on a certain day, that they're still trying to work out what the culture is, but it's not back to anywhere near where it was pre-pandemic.
Nicolas, what are you seeing? Did we lose you?
See, Nicolas has got the right devices, but maybe he hasn't got the bandwidth, ironically.
It's exactly what we're talking about. While we're waiting for Nicolas to weigh in and come back, I think we're seeing the same thing here in the US. We're seeing some companies actually come back. I think the current economic conditions, at least here in the US, are going to start putting more pressure on people to come in. But I do think hybrid workforce is here to stay. I think it's actually a good balance to have a mixture. It's good to see people in the office, but it's also good to have the work-life balance. But when you talk about the component of where people work remotely, I think it amplifies all these issues with bad call quality, because now you're dealing with their ISP, their home setup, and it just becomes a lot more complex. Nicolas, are you back with us?
I am back, if you can hear me.
We can hear you. I interrupted you, so go ahead and continue with your thought.
Yeah, the irony is that, and this is exactly the thing that we have, is that as good as the fiber is at home, occasionally we're subject to network conditions, right? And so we're doing this thing where at the moment we're having a call, and it's a global call, and we're different parts of the world, but we are at the mercy of what happens at our endpoint, very much like what happens with Teams. So, these kind of things, they are what they are, and we have to do what we can do in order to make the best of the experience. And we want to, of course, make that as predictable as we can with the devices that we have. And that's a difficult problem to solve, because how do you know what I'm working on, and how do you know what kind of network conditions I have? And Tom will get a complaint that, my gosh, this call is terrible, but where do I even start troubleshooting the cause of that call, right?
Yeah, this is like perfect example. And so we're not on Teams now, unfortunately, but how Teams minimizes these issues is interesting. So Microsoft have put a ton of investment here into adaptive codecs and various AI. Obviously, AI is the current in-word to say. I mean, a lot of this is machine learning more than AI, I think. But what's happening with these codecs now, and you would have seen this if you compare Skype Business to Teams, the codecs have matured to the point where you can get away with way more. So Teams calls on cellular data is way better than it ever was on Skype. The irony of this from a user perspective is the more you can do, the more you stretch. So like, on my mobile, I usually do calls on data now. Like I don't bother dialing, but they're all nearly all meetings, so I click to join. I would have dialed in PSTN, dialed in on those on Skype because for the stability. So Teams does a lot to make the best out of network conditions, but people will continue to stretch the limits.
Absolutely. So do you want to dive into how we can use the native Microsoft tools, Tom?
Yeah, sure. There's some really good stuff in the box, and to be fair to Microsoft, they've put some investment here. It was pretty weak in the Skype days. It's got a lot better. It's not perfect. There's still work to be done and opportunities to improve. But to give the audience some value, we'll talk through the two kind of major tooling. So we've got Teams in the admin center, Teams admin center, and we'll call it TAC sometimes. We have call analytics, and then outside of the Teams admin center, we have call quality dashboard. So we'll jump into call analytics first. And this is very much your first line, second line kind of troubleshooting. So this is someone says they had a bad call. I want to go and look them up individually. So this is not how is my entire tenant, how is my entire world, how is the UK, how is the US. This is Jay had a bad call. He hit the help desk. He says, look, it was rubbish. I don't know what was rubbish. I can't tell you anymore. Just like it was rubbish. Someone sort it out. Classic user stuff. So here you can see some of the things you can get out of Teams Admin Center. You can see the call history of the individual user. You can see the devices they used. You can see their Wi-Fi signal strength. You can see their packet loss jitter. You're very much starting at the point of look at the user, look at their individual calls, and then find that call and then drill down. If we jump forward, Jay. So this is what it would look like on a drill down. So when we pick an individual call, and in this case it's a meeting, you can see I've blanked out the names, but there's a lot of different users in that list, and we can see when they joined, when they left, how their stream behaved, if they used video, if they used desktop sharing. And you can go further into those streams and see the packet loss, jitter, latency for those individual streams as well. So it is quite useful. It won't necessarily immediately flag you like this is definitely the root cause, but if a user complains, this is a good first point to look at, and look out for things like, oh, hey, they were on Wi-Fi and the signal strength looked low, or they have particularly high packet loss or jitter or latency. If you jump forward again for us, Jay. Here's an example of where Teams Admin Center in the Call Analytics has flagged. So it's a bit small there on the text, but what it's flagging is there's individual issues with packet loss or jitter. It will highlight those in red. The red box I've added, but it gives a little red bar. So this is good for individual user proactively complains. There's no alerting here. There's no kind of top-down reporting. There's no highlighting of individual issues. It's just if a user complains, I can go find the issue.
So Tom, as a commentary to that, how would you then go in a super large organization if you've got a group of people using this dashboard? You've got an office that you want to debug, a particular location, or a group of people in a particular setting, like a group of executives. Where would you do that with the tool that you've got at hand?
Yeah, you teed me up perfectly there, because this is not the tool. So for a group of executives, you could click in one by one and look at their call history and try and work it out. If it's a handful, if it's 3, 4, 5, you could manually click through. But Call Quality Dashboard, which is the second tool we're going to look at, is the polar opposite of this tool. So Call Quality Dashboard is the top-down entire view of the world. So if you're looking for how is UK office London doing, or how is the US as a whole doing, that's where we'd go to Call Quality Dashboard.
Nicolas, how are you using your customers?
If we want to jump into the next slide and go straight to 17.
Sure. If you don't mind me jumping in here, Tom, real quick. I just wanted to ask Nicolas, how is he seeing his customers use the Teams Admin Center before we dive into the Call Quality Dashboard?
So the general feedback is that it's okay, but I can see that I've had an issue, but I don't necessarily know what the root cause is, and I don't know how to find root cause. So I can see some data, but not a lot. And it's in America, you've got this lovely saying that it's a mile wide and an inch deep. And I think in this view, we have some detail, but not really enough that I'm going to spend money to solve a problem.
Perfect. Thank you. Tom, now we can dive into the Call Quality Dashboard. I just wanted to hear, I love these discussions because it gets me the ability to triangulate kind of what I'm hearing from our customer base as well. And obviously, I'm very intensely interested in this topic because we're investing a lot in this area, and we want to make it easier for people who have to support their users, their Teams community. Let's dive into the Call Quality Dashboard.
Yeah, so Call Quality Dashboard, say it's very much your level. I say level 3, level 4. It's probably more level 4 engineers, so it's pretty intense in terms of the level of detail. And it's tenant level down. It's everything. This is the maximum amount of data you can get. So there are web reports and Power BI reports, and we'll show a couple of those in some slides. And also, if you've got the Power BI skill, and I would say this is more a Power BI person, Microsoft will pitch it as anybody could do it, but certainly at Modality we had a Power BI team that did this, and I wouldn't say it was an everybody task. You can craft your own sliced and diced reports.
It's not easy though, and the first time you look at this, I think it's like the first time you've ever opened a PowerShell window and you see that flashing prompt, you go, well, where do I start and what do I do next, right? Because it's just an overwhelming amount of detail.
Yeah, for sure. If we jump forward, I've highlighted some of the detail that you can get, and it's essentially Microsoft take all the data and put it into a pre-computed model. So there's literally like multiple hundreds of attributes, and the way it's broken down is you have dimensions, which are essentially categories of the data. You've got measures, which are what you want to report on. So that might be a count, like a number of poor calls, number of packet loss. And then you've got filters that slice and dice the data to include or exclude. So you bring those three things together, and it takes a while to get your head around this, but you can essentially slice and dice the data to say, I want this data for this range with these filters on. So show me the number of poor calls by building in the past month, and that will give you a query on this, essentially a cube of data, and present you the results. But yeah, if that all doesn't make sense to you, don't feel bad, because it's like it takes a while to get your head around this. Microsoft have a whole bunch of canned reports as well, but you still have to sort of understand the basics of where the data is coming from.
I also want to add, there's an advantage to this, that the call quality dashboard, of course, is free, and you're going to get out of it what you invest into it. And ideally, you don't want to be in the position that you look at it the first time when you have an issue, because you don't necessarily know what's normal in your environment. And you'd like to have an understanding of what normal looks like in the call quality dashboard, both in the web view and in the Power BI view, so that you have an idea of where to start. And if you are looking for abnormal, what that could look like in relation to normal. So like Tom says, you want to start somewhere, and ideally spend some time with it, and not when the building is already burning.
Yeah, and it really is an investment in time. This is not a skill up in a couple of hours task. This is a dedicate a few days task, and kind of the customers that use this well almost have an SME that's in the mix that dedicates significant time to looking at these reports. If we jump forward, there's some examples.
Sure. My mouse doesn't want to work today. There we go. Clicking. I've been clicking.
These are the types of reports you can get out of it. I won't go through every single one, but you can get a feel. Each one of these is a Power BI page in the Power BI. They call it Quality of Experience Pack. And this is written by one of the guys, field guys at Microsoft. So it's really good stuff. But you can see you've got network issues, you've got audio health, you've got media health, you've got devices. So the data is there. If you jump forward for a second, Jay, it will show some of the examples of I didn't cut every single one, but I put a couple in. But you'll get a feel for the kind of the complexity of the dashboard. So this is the type of thing you'll be presented with. So again, it's all there. It's really good stuff. But to Nicolas's point, if you see things that are, and obviously this is my tenant, so this is relatively light usage. Normally, this will be a vastly bigger set of data. If some things are different numbers, is that good? Is that bad? Like is that normal? You don't have an infinite amount of data here. That the time is constrained, so it's 28 days for personally identifiable data, and I think 90 days for all the other data. So yeah, if you're not in this on a regular basis, you wouldn't necessarily know what you're looking for.
Tom, did you color code this green, or is this green? What is the green color and the yellow, red?
Yeah, that's Microsoft. So they have some preset thresholds. So you can't edit their thresholds in this data. They will set the thresholds for you. So obviously green is good, amber to red, which in itself is quite interesting with these reports. So if you create custom Power BI reports, you can begin to do some stuff yourself, but Microsoft set the thresholds in the data cube so that their definition of bad is bad, their definition of good is good.
Perfect, thank you. What is this report showing us?
Yeah, so this is a weekly, or I think weekly over 30 days network metrics. So again, to your question, like we've got some good information here. We've got a breakdown of subnets, we've got some ISP information, but is this normal? Is this good? Is this bad? The answer is sort of, it depends. Like a lot of network issues, might be within threshold of acceptability and not actually impact the quality. What you're really looking to do here with Call Quality Dashboard is spend some quality time with it, looking at what's outstandingly different to other sites. So and that might be outstandingly good or outstandingly bad, but you're kind of spending a lot of time digging around, finding variables and finding what problem to attack first, essentially.
I also want to add that there's an amount of data that you want to put into your tenant in order for this actually to make sense. So if you don't define your locations and your network information and your subnets within that, then what you get out of this is a lot more generic than what it could be.
And Nicolas, how can you speak to that a little bit? I know your company offers that to help people set it up. Is that, what are the challenges there? How long does that take? You can just double click into that.
It's actually not a lot of work, and ideally what you want to do is you want to understand the topology of the network so that you understand what's inside and what's outside. And if you're having a network issue and the IP range that comes back and report is like a 192.168.0 type subnet that's clearly a home network, well, how do I know that's home versus my corporate network that ideally I've defined that I have a head office or I have a VPN range and I've got a satellite range, so that I know that when I have particular types of network issues, I'm able to narrow that down to this is VPN specific, this is head office specific, or this is a satellite or branch office specific. The work to do that, honestly, it's a couple of hours work, but in terms of the dividends it pays in terms of reporting accuracy is wonderful.
A couple of hours. You guys do it faster than I've seen people do it then, Nick, because I've seen people spend days and weeks over mapping those subnets.
Well, it helps if you have them, right? And so
that's
one
the
of the
thing.
precursors,
Yeah, you need that information.
yes. If you're not discovering that information and you have that information, it depends on how mature your customer is. And you're right, Tom. For some customers, we actually have to do a network discovery exercise and tell them what they have. But it does help when you've got a mature networking team that is able to give you a list of subnets. Very much like if we're building an Active Directory design, we'd expect to know how the physical topology would map onto the logical Active Directory topology, right?
Yeah, for sure. Another point there on the back of locations, and we can jump to the next slide, is like knowing what you're responsible for as well is quite important as IT. Like knowing I can control this or I can't control that, and helping report that back to the users.
Tom, real quick, before we dive too deep into this, you and Nicolas were you're seeing different stories, right? So Nick's company helps people set this up all the time. When you say that it takes days, is it because the Skype, I almost said Skype engineers, shows you how old I am, the Teams engineers, do they have challenges working with the networking team to get the information, and the networking team doesn't have the subnets? Is that really the blockage in that communication and bureaucracy and priority?
Yeah. More often, so the UC team or the Teams team sometimes aren't in the network team. Usually they're more from the Microsoft side of the fence often, and they don't have all the subnets mapped out, so they have to talk to the network team. The network team might have some kind of IP address allocation system or database that they're rarely perfect, so it's just going back and forth. And I've seen often in big customers, it'll be this team looking at this data saying there's a hell of a lot of calls coming from this subnet, what's that? And then the network team will go, oh yeah, that's the Paris office that we forgot to tell you we've got. Like so there's just a back and forth of like almost this, because Teams is used so pervasively in every location. Often you're the group saying, are you sure this isn't an office subnet? Because there's like 50,000 calls. Oh yeah, that's an office. So yeah, just that back and forth of getting the mapping right.
Perfect. I just wanted to understand the differences. It looks like there's a lot of great data here, and the challenge is just making heads or tails of it and understanding what to do with the data and what to go look for.
That's it. The data is there. You just need a modality. I'm sure Nick's company do this as well. Like we often regularly checked in with customers and looked at this for them as a pro services offer, because it's like sometimes you as an individual customer don't know what's good or bad and need that help of weeding through it all.
Makes total sense.
I wanted to add, this takes me back to the first point that I made, that the network that we start with, that network that we use to browse the internet, it's not the same network that you use to consume cloud services. And there's that challenge that we put onto our customers that says, you need to change your networking sometimes and consider how you access the internet and what secure means to you, so that you have a quality experience when it comes to consuming a cloud service like Teams.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so this slide was just highlighting that the CQD's fixed what's good, what's bad. So this can be a bit of a limitation for some customers, like if they don't agree around these thresholds. Some customers think these are too generous, like the level of packet loss or the level of round trip time before Microsoft consider it bad. So that's just worth looking at. And then the last slide is just wanted to leave people with some value around call quality dashboard. So some last thoughts, and Nick, please jump in as well. You need some Power BI skills, like that can be fairly basic. You can download the templates, but you at least need to understand how to run Power BI desktop, how to sign up for powerbi.com, or have a workspace. You probably need to work with that team to get a workspace if you're in a big organization. You will need the Power BI Pro license for any individuals who are looking at the reports, so keep that in mind. If you've got E5, you're covered. The CQD only keeps PII, personally identifiable information, or end user identifiable information, as Microsoft called it, for 28 days. So when Nick talked about that troubleshooting a bunch of users issue, you've only got a window of 28 days before it all gets anonymized, and it's just kind of GUIDs rather than actual users. And Nick called this one out as well. The building mapping is absolutely essential, and you'll find that in most tooling. You'll need to map your networks. It's fixed in terms of it's pre-computed trends, so 7-day, 5-day, 30-day. It's prefixed thresholds for good and bad quality as well. So just be aware going in, you're only going to be able to slice this data in the way Microsoft intended. That you don't have the raw data, you have a pre-computed cube. You can slice and dice the data. Plenty there, but just worth being aware. If your team are used to reporting in, an arbitrary number, you may not be able to do that the way you did before.
Tom, you make a point on the slide about the reports taking a while to load in large environments. It doesn't have to be very large for this report to take a while to load.
Yeah. By default, it's slow, and it gets slower. I have a customer that loads them on a Saturday. They have an engineer who does it the weekend because they're a big over 100,000 users. But yes, the way the reports work technically, they hydrate from the database every time you load them, so that the Power BI service doesn't cache any data. So literally, it's a giant database query every time you load a page up in Power BI. So yeah, for sure, don't present these reports to your exec leadership team in real time. You have to sort of screenshot them and put them into PowerPoint and show them summaries, because it doesn't load super promptly just by the architecture.
True story.
I felt that pain.
Tom, thank you for that overview of the native Microsoft tools. What we'd like to talk a little bit now about is how do you go beyond the native tools? And what I will say about our tool set and kind of what we built is this is not an or conversation. Do you use the Microsoft native tools, or do you use eNow or another third-party vendor? To me, it's really an and conversation. So Microsoft has made some amazing tools. There's definitely some gaps, and I think they've always had that track record of having gaps. And there's been they've left the market for people like us to come out and help solve problems. So eNow has been around unbelievably for 18 years. I mentioned to you guys, and you guys both know this about me, I've been an Exchange veteran for a long time. And what led me to start eNow was actually an accident. I went out to start a consulting company. And when we were consulting, we realized we need more data from our customers to be able to estimate projects. So we built a tool. The tool didn't really have commercial aspirations. It was just to help our consultants to get more insight, do a discovery. And then once our customers saw that tool, we got feedback that they wanted us to keep going. And so we started to be honest, it was a reluctancy by me to get into the software space, because I was more of a systems, more of an IT person. That's very different than coding. And you can see all the gray hair that I have. after running software development teams and coding and supporting large customers, it is definitely a big challenge. But our passion has been around simplifying the job of the IT administrator, giving them visibility. In the on-prem days, it was a different game. It was monitoring servers. Now we've kind of switched to this watching the service and being able to help give visibility and answer the question, is it a Microsoft problem or is it a me problem? And if it's a me problem, where do I begin? So in specific with Teams Call Quality, we do around Teams, we do several different things. Before I dive into that, I want to show you our dashboard. And I want to say I'm super grateful, Nick and Tom, of the time that you guys have given me and my development team for providing input, real world experience, because a lot of things I'm going to show the audience today is input that I directly gotten from you, other MVPs, and of course our customers. So bear with me as I shift screens.
Yeah, I just want to say that I love that approach. Like even doing a webinar where it's like, here's what's in the box and here's where we fill the gaps. A lot of vendors go straight for, let's ignore what's in the box and go straight to the tooling we want to sell. So it's nice that you guys took a lot of time to look at what was native and try and find places to add value.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft does a great job of giving you information. And then the question is, what do you do with that information? How do you go hunt the information? And if you're a Power BI expert, you have a lot of time, that's great. Not everyone has that. So what we have done, I've done this for years, is built a simple dashboard. It uses a traffic light system. So green is good, yellow is warning, red is critical. Depending upon the technologies that we support, you'll notice here we have some Exchange servers, we have Office 365, we have an Active Directory environment, but the headings are different. And the reason for that is we put a lot of thought and time into how we lay out features so that when the lights go off, you understand what's causing the problem. And so as you can see here, we covered the entire Office 365 stack, but let's focus a little bit here on Teams. So for Teams, one of the things that we do is we've created something called the eNow Simplified Teams Call Quality Dashboard. And what this dashboard does is it enables you to monitor your organization in real time, but it answers two key questions. How is your organization doing? Tom, you mentioned about baselining and understanding are things abnormal or normal. Well, this dashboard answers that question. And how it does it is it takes the key performance indicators that Microsoft has, things like jitter, do you sound like a robot? Are calls being dropped? Is video poor? And we just make it very, very simple for you to be able to answer management's questions and also answer your own question is, how is Teams performing over the last month, week, and day? And then these indicators change based on the time frame and if they're significantly down. So you can actually trend it out, see how things are performing. And then here at the bottom, what we've done is we answer the question, how do users think Teams is performing? I think we've all had that scenario where someone calls into the help desk or calls you and says, hey, my Teams call quality sucked. And then you go and look at the Teams data and it was fine. It's just, for whatever reason, the telemetry didn't capture it. When they're done with the call, I think it's 1 out of every 10 calls, and I tested this, as you keep making more bad calls or keep labeling them bad calls, the frequency changes. If you've ever seen that 5-star rating that you get, we aggregate all that data for your organization, and then we present it here so you can see, you know, my users think we're doing great. We're at a 4.61, or conversely, my users think that we're not doing well. So this dashboard is designed to give you that 50,000 foot level and make it just real simple to understand how Teams is performing for your organization. In addition to this particular feature, we also have a host of other features. Bear with me as I click over. And I'm using a couple of dev systems because some of this stuff is actually being made right now. What I just showed you is available. We've introduced just recently, about 2 weeks ago, something called Teams VIP monitoring. I think we've all had this scenario where you had an executive, especially in this work from home environment where things are crazy, people are working all over the place. They might be on vacation in Mexico or South Africa, or just somewhere where network connectivity is not great and they're frustrated. This gives you the ability to take an executive or another high profile user, someone you just can't solve the problem for, put them into a container. And then what we do is we monitor their call data in real time, I should say near real time to be technically accurate, and give you the ability to see what's causing their poor calls. A couple of things that we do here is it says here poor calls. We actually clean up Microsoft's data to make sure that they legitimately had a poor call. We also aggregate their rate my call data. And then when you click into the user, what you get is you get all their bad calls over the last 37 or last day. You can come in here and see, this is actually my call data. I've had 5 bad calls in the last 30 days, 1 bad conference call. The network has been the primary cause of it. You can see here, I've been in 6 cities in the last 5 weeks. I've been all over, been to Mexico, for example. I mentioned connectivity is not great there. And I know that my team will tell you I'm always complaining that when I'm on my phone, the call quality is just not great. And you can see here, that's representative of the data. 66% of my poor calls are because of that. You can see that I'm using the default input device. If there's a scenario where you're talking to one person or a user's talking to one person and they're having a lot of bad calls, you'd be able to see that there. We've added ISP information, so you can see that I'm using Verizon. We've added what Teams client version we're using, and then you have some other data here. What's really cool about this dashboard, and this is different than Teams Admin Center, is that you can get all that data in just one view. It's all the bad calls. When you look at the Teams Admin Center, you get the hunt and peck to find the bad calls. All the calls are looped together. And then when you click here on this link, what it does is it takes you straight to the Teams Admin Center. So again, very complementary tool set. And then you can then dive into troubleshooting more, getting detailed logs, etc. So that feature is designed just to make troubleshooting a little bit easier.
That's a real big one I see in enterprise. The need to watch. The need to watch those more. Everyone's equal, but some users are more equal than others or more painful than others. So I had a customer where they wanted this approach, and it was they would ping the PAs of the people and be like, just a heads up, like Sarah's had a bad call and it was network. So like you almost get ahead of the complaint to be like, look, we're on it and it was your Wi-Fi. Like what do you want from us, kind of thing. It gives you a real opportunity to show that you're on the ball with those key users.
Yeah, and I think we've all had that experience as long as we've been in IT of the angry executive yelling.
Yeah.
And that's never fun because sometimes we feel like our job's at risk, and hopefully that behavior is changing. But when an executive, they have a lot on their plate and therefore they have less patience, I'm not at all excusing that type of behavior, but they get frustrated when the calls aren't working. This just gives you that real-time ability to monitor it quickly and hopefully help you troubleshoot it and make things easier. We've taken that same feature and we've built something for the help desk called the Teams Call Quality Support Portal, so you can get the same view. So without the monitoring, you can come in and click on a user, be able to troubleshoot it, be able to dive into the data and get a deeper view. And then lastly, we've added something called the Teams Call Ports, Microsoft Teams Port Call Snapshot. That is a mouthful. What this feature does is it takes all the port calls in the last day, 7 days, and 30. You can mess with the time frames here. You can see all the port calls by each user down below. And then we've aggregated that data. So again, you can try to figure out, okay, well, what is the bulk of my problems coming from? Did I roll out a Teams client version? What Teams client versions are my users using? We have other reports that dive into what users are using what version. You can see what ISPs your users are using, what location. And then we've added a couple things in here. And Nicolas, if you could talk a little bit about the HTTP proxy field and transport fields, because your team directly contributed to this aspect of the feature.
So I'd love to. Proxies are evil. And if we find that there's a proxy in the way of the network path, so you've got something that's inspecting the traffic between your Teams client and the Teams service, then the Teams service knows about it, the Teams client knows about it, because it has to switch protocols. And I don't want to get too technical, but we move from UDP to TCP. And once we do that, we know that there's something in the way interfering with the network path in some way, shape, or form. And that's a huge indicator for us from a network reporting point of view that we are doing things that we shouldn't do. So VPNs and proxies are terrible when it comes to doing anything from a network point of view. They inspect the traffic. It's actually not supported by the Office 365 service description for you to break and inspect network traffic. However, since we need to feel that we feel secure, or it's normally the kind of thing that the network team forces on us, it's very difficult to argue with until we have some kind of data like this that shows that a proxy device or a network configuration is the direct cause of a poor call quality experience. And I've spent many hours on the call quality dashboard with the network teams going, do you see here, this is where we're breaking out to a cloud-based proxy,
Yeah.
which you said you weren't doing, but actually you are, or this is your on-premises proxy, which you said you're bypassing, or this is where you are breaking SSL, and we can see it. We can see it in the reports.
It's with firewall teams. I feel like every time you submit a firewall request, by default they say, yeah, we've done it, and they haven't, just to see if you really need it. Like, networks are the same. They're like, yeah, we've turned all the proxies off, whatever. I might be generalizing there, but I've had it more than once. But yeah, having the data to take back to the network team and be like, look, there is a scenario where we're hitting VPN or proxy, can you help us? Or TCP, as you say, is killer. The other thing I would add there as well is you might be getting away with it some of the time. So you might see TCP, but the users think it's okay and you're getting away with it. Be aware those network devices have a certain capacity where they'll start topping out. So you might not see it every day, but the day that multiple people get into the office and all do video, you'll top out that firewall or proxy and you'll have an issue.
Yeah. And what's nice about these reports and what we've enjoyed in building this view is that we now have a view that we can walk into a company, we can switch on the tool set, and we can say at a glance, you have an issue. And that's huge for us.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, Nicolas, is we want to complement the native Microsoft tools and make it really simple so that they can answer management's questions, understand what is their baseline today, how do they improve upon it, how do they support executives, because executives, again, are important people. They help drive the company, but you want to make sure that they can communicate correctly. And then we also want to serve the service desk and level 2 teams. So giving them the ability to troubleshoot this information on their own, that gives the level 3 engineers more time to work on more complex issues and different things. So we're covering a lot of different areas. I really wanted to make sure that this webinar was more about value and practical value. If you guys that are on the webinar are interested in learning more about who we are, what we do, we're a global organization. Feel free to hit up the QR code, contact us. But hopefully you got some good value out of today's webinar. In terms of questions, do we have any questions, Bryce? And I want to leave the contact information up here for Tom and Nicolas so that those in the audience that have interest in either the training or any of the services that Nicolas companies provide, they can reach out.
Absolutely. And everyone, and we're not going to be able to hear you, but give a round of applause for Tom, Nicolas, Jay. Fantastic stuff. We do have a few questions, which is great. So the first question here is for Tom. So we have someone asking about PowerShell templates to import. They're asking if they can do this with no skill at all. Where can they get some training?
Yeah, so it's well timed actually. So we have a video on Empowering Cloud of how to upload the Power BI reports for CQD. So it does take you through step by step to walk through how to do that. So if you go to empowering.cloud, you can sign in for free. Just search for CQD, Call Quality Dashboard, and you'll find the how-to video there.
Wonderful. And Nicolas, a question just about out-of-the-box reporting with Microsoft. Can you maybe talk more about, or maybe give an example of how hard it is to do all of this without your product?
I would actually argue that doing this or using what we've seen from this product is actually a great coach in terms of understanding what's normal in the call quality dashboard. We said earlier it's really difficult to understand what's normal and where to start, and so if you don't have the time to invest and you don't know what the colors mean and what a 15 means on a page, and you need to go look it up and understand what does Wi-Fi mean in the context of device and the call quality, I would argue that it's really much simpler to use the one view that we have and then use the learnings of that to go back to the call quality dashboard to then drill into the depth that you're learning about, that you're understanding about. So I would use the one as a coach. So use eNow to help you ramp up and get to that level 3, level 4 experience on the call quality dashboard, because it will yield results if you are willing to invest in it, as Tom said.
And Jay, I think the last question will be for you here, kind of a two-parter. Do you offer a demo version, and then do you also monitor Office 365, Microsoft 365 services in similar ways?
So I'll take the second question first. Absolutely. How I would answer that question is we cover all the Office 365 workloads. What we're doing with Teams is a little bit of a different approach. Some vendors require an agent on every device. We're really leveraging the backend data. We do have the ability to put an agent on a device and dive deeper into what's happening, but we really like to look at the backend data and just make things simple. There's a lot of vendors out there that do different things, and you have to look at your requirements to figure out who's best for you. In terms of the other 365 services, yes, we have over 100 synthetic transactions that cover the different workloads. So for Exchange, we can send mail, look up the address book, check free busy. I mean, there's just so many tests that we run. But the key thing is the simplicity and understanding. Is it a Microsoft problem, me problem? And then we have a whole reporting engine that connects to this, that gets into governance, covers other different aspects of managing 365. I have a lot of empathy, again, because I feel like we're on this bullet train, and administrators have to support all this technology with less visibility. And then the last thing that we have that's pretty cool is a license optimization module that goes in and helps you streamline how you manage Microsoft licenses, how do you understand Microsoft licenses. So yeah, I mean, this is Teams is one component. We're super excited about this because we've been really doubling down and working with folks like Tom and Nicolas and other MVPs to understand what the challenges are. As far as a demo, what we do is we have a sandbox where you can jump into it, simulate outages, play with things, and absolutely you can talk to our sales team about that. We would definitely want to make it easy for you to understand what we do and how we can help.
Probably worth calling out there as well that data is automatically collected by the Office 365 tenant. So if they do want to go down the route of checking out email, it's not like from the day of install it starts collecting data. The data's constantly collected by the tenant, so there's value to be had there, kind of straight on install, really.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Absolutely. But again, we're not a replacement for the native tools. I really want to make that clear. We're complementary to the native tools, and we're a jump off, if you will, to get to the native tools. But it's a quick way to get the visibility of where am I, monitor your VIP execs, get visibility, and it's a great tool to make your job easier.
Well, Tom, Jay, Nicolas, thank you so much again. For those of you on the call, thank you so much for joining us. We will send out the recording of this event following the end of today's session here. We'll also include contact information for Tom and for Nicolas as well, if you want to reach out to them and contact them for their service and assistance. So again, thank you so much to everybody. If you have questions about anything we talked about today, please do not hesitate to reach out, and we look forward to seeing y'all on the next webinar. Thanks all.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, Nick.
It's really fun.
Really appreciate it. Cheers, guys.
Thanks so
See you
much.
next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.